Ever wondered how you can actually sync your data in iCloud using CloudKit? Well, don't worry, I got you, man. In this video, I'm going to cover how easy it is to add CloudKit support to your SwiftData apps. In this free SwiftData course, we'll continue improving our to-do list app. Because I like to spoil you, I'll even cover how to test syncing, common moments, and extra treats for things that you should definitely look out for. Like I said, man, don't say I don't spoil you. Let's get this money. So if you don't know what CloudKit is, in simple terms, it's just a backend for your apps. You can use it for web or native to help sync data across your applications. Now, when you're working with CloudKit, there's three kinds of databases. There's public, private, and shared. Now, for this video, we're only going to be looking at private, and that's because at this moment in time when I record this video, SwiftData only supports private. It doesn't support public or shared just yet. So hopefully in Dub 24, yeah, Tim comes in with the goods. Now I know you want to just dive into the code, right? But you can't just dive in. You got to take it easy now. And the reason why is because there's a few things to set up before you can actually, test out and implement CloudKit. Now, the first thing is, I'm going to give you a bit of a checklist now. So the first thing you need to have before you can even do any of this is an Apple developer account. You also need to have an Apple ID, which you can use to sign in. And you also need to add your Apple ID to Xcode as well. And you can do that by simply going to Xcode, settings, and then by going to the accounts and then hitting the plus button here, you should be able to add your account and go from there. Cool. So now that you've done that, on your project, you want to make sure you have your project selected and go to targets, and on targets, go to sign in capabilities. Now, if you're using provisioning profiles, that's fine. But if you're not, you want to make sure that your team is selected here so you can actually access those capabilities for your developer license. And in order to actually get CloudKit working, you need to add some capabilities. Now, the first capability you need to add is the actual iCloud one. So if you go to capability on the plus button here and then search for cloud, you'll see iCloud as an option. So we want to add that. And you'll see that what happens is it adds it to your, profile. So on iCloud, there's an option here called CloudKit. So we want to select this, and then we want to create a CloudKit container. Now, the best way to do this is actually just basically use your bundle identifier. So I would just copy your bundle identifier and then hit the plus button here, and then just paste that in here and then hit OK. And what you should now see is your container, and you should be able to select it. Now it will be in red, and the only reason why it's in red is because we've not actually gone to the console and set everything up. It will disappear this soon. Now, because it's using push notifications as well to basically update your app when you're getting updates from CloudKit, a good thing to add in is the remote push notifications. So if you go to background modes, you actually want to choose remote notifications as well to make sure that your app receives, background push notifications for this to work as well, just to be safe. So now you'll see that this has actually gone red, so it's all set up for us. So this is actually all set up for us, right? You don't actually have to do anything, but let's say just in case you wanted to set up different containers and whatnot, and you don't want to use this one as a default, you can actually change how your app chooses a container. So if I was to go to our item container file, and we set this up when I did this video that you can see on the screen here, where we saw how to pre-fill data, we're actually able now to, if we wanted to, actually pass in our own configuration. So if I was to just click into model configuration to see the documentation, you'll see if I scroll down, there's actually in the init a CloudKit database. By default, it's actually automatic, so it'll use what's in the project. But if I wanted to, I could actually specify by scrolling up a bit the type of database name here by specifying private and then the database name. So we're not doing that for this video, but if you wanted to, just know that you have the options there. Now, something else that we'll want to do as well is actually sign in with our Apple ID. Now, I'm testing this out with my own personal one. So if I go to settings, you can see here that you can actually sign in with your Apple ID. So I'm going to do that now. And now you can see that I'm all signed in with the Apple ID. So what I'm actually going to do in this video is I'm going to get another device and to show you how to test this out, because you actually need two devices to test this out. You could use two simulators, but it's a bit of a drawback, and I'll get onto that later. So make sure you stick around because I'm actually going to go into more detail about gotchas that you should look out for, the CloudKit database, and other things that are really useful when you want to work with CloudKit and SwiftData. But if you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you check out the entire SwiftData series on my channel. And also as well, I'd really appreciate it if you gave this video a thumbs up and you subscribe to the channel, as well as hit the notification bell to get updates so you don't miss any, kind of videos that I'm releasing recently. So let's just run this and see what happens. So we'll go run our project now that we've added CloudKit to it, and we'll see if everything works, and boom, we get a crash. So the problem that we actually have now is that when you're working with CloudKit, if we actually look at the console logs, there's a few things that you need to be aware of, and you need to make sure that your properties have. Now, some of these things is you need to make sure that all your properties are either optional or have a default value. All your relationships must also be optional, and you can't actually use you actually can't use unique constraints as well on, in your model. So you can't use unique, it's not supported in CloudKit. So what we're going to need to do is in our model that we have, we're going to need to update this to follow those rules. So I'm just going to go to our item, and essentially we're just going to make sure that they all have a default value. So if we actually look at our model here, we actually assign our title, due date, critical, completed. So that's all right. That's okay. So you'll see now if we scroll down to our category, we've got unique here. So let's just take this out and then we'll just run it and see what happens to see if everything's okay or not. And it's still complaining. So it's saying here that we need to have a default value on category title. So let's just go back and we'll resolve this. So on category title, we need to have a default value. And then on item title, we'll set that there. And then due date, we'll set that to now. Is critical, we'll set that to false. And then is completed, we'll also set that to false as well. And then item.title, so we'll actually say date.now. And then item.title, if I scroll down, that should be assigned cool. So now let's run it again and see what happens. And you'll see now that it doesn't crash because we've fulfilled those rules. Cool. So you'll see a whole bunch of stuff going on here in the background, and you'll see that it's actually syncing. It should be syncing this to CloudKit. So if you want to see your CloudKit changes, you actually go to the CloudKit console. But before we do that, I just want to show you what happens when you're actually, using CloudKit in an app. So in order to test this out, you're going to need two devices. Now, you've got two ways to testing this. Either A, you set up a simulator, so you have two simulators on the screen. Now, the problem is if you use two simulators, you're not able to actually get real-time changes. And the reason why is because simulators can't receive the push notifications to actually update the content on the UI. So the other way to test this out is to have two real devices, if you're lucky enough to have two iPhones, two real devices. Or if you don't have two real devices, you can actually use just one real device and one simulator. But you have to use the simulator to actually reflect the changes in real time on the real device. Now, I'm going to use an iPhone 8 to show you the changes, and I'm going to use the simulator to make changes in real time on the iPhone 8. So like I said before, in order for us to actually see this in action, we're going to need to use the simulator to reflect changes on our real device on the left-hand side. So I'm just going to do a little magic trick and hide myself. See that, man? Power of editing. So you should still be able to see that. And you can see here, I can interact with my iPhone 8 here and my simulator. So if I was to now update like the first, one of these items, for example, so we'll just say go visit family, we'll turn that on the simulator. You'll now see that on our device, it's actually highlighted that as well. Now, one thing you will see is that we're actually getting duplicate items here. And the reason why is because when we pre-fill content, we actually don't have any code to stop iCloud from syncing up every single time. So we'll handle that later on in this video. But what I just want to show you is that if I added a brand new item to do called let's call this, I don't know, something like go for a run. And we'll just say it's important. I can now create this. And if we actually look on our left-hand side, you should have saw that I automatically added go for a run, and I can actually edit this. So I could basically change the name of it and say go for a 4K run. And I can say it's not as important. Update. Cool. And you can see here as well that if I was to select it, it will also update on the left-hand side here where it's turned on. Sweet. So you can now see that we're actually able to test out our syncing. Now, I will warn you before we continue that sometimes iCloud can be really funny and it's not instant, so you might have to wait. Best thing you can do is just look at the console logs here and just try to figure out what might be going on. And I'm back on the screen. So I said before that we're actually able to see all of our data now. We're able to see like our duplicates, but if we want to actually query it and look at it in some kind of dashboard, we could easily do that as well by going to the CloudKit console. So if you click on this button here, it will actually open up Apple Developer and you'll be presented with this screen here. So what we're able to do is choose the option for CloudKit database. And if we just go here to enable, if we just go here and refresh the screen, we should see our container. Oh wait, so you want to make sure that your team is selected here, so not your personal. And you should see on the left hand side that we're able to see our, container, our database. So that's listed right here. Now, if I was to actually try and query records here, this won't work. And the reason why is because right now I'm actually signed in with my developer email. This is not the same Apple ID as my, test devices that I have set up here. So in order to actually sign in as a user with the Apple ID, there's a nice feature here that my head is covering. There's a nice feature here called as iCloud account. So what you're able to do here is actually sign in with an Apple ID. So this can be useful if you want to test someone's account, if they want to send it to you, like, a user in production, or if you just want to test with your own separate Apple ID whilst you're developing this. So I'm just going to sign in with my Apple ID. If I choose open sign in window, and then now you can see that I'm actually able to act as if I'm, that Apple ID. So back in the room. So if I want to actually query what's in our database, we have to do a few things here. So the first thing we need to do is actually change this from public to private. And then rather than default zone, we want to choose our Apple Core Data CloudKit zone here. And then we want to go to query record type. And you can see here, our category and our item has automatically been synced to CloudKit. So I'm going to choose item and then we can hit query records. Now you'll get this error here that says field record name is not matched queryable. And essentially what this basically means is that we need to basically mark our records so that we can actually write queries on it. Now in order to do that, we just need to enable the record name. So to do this, we'll go to indexes, item, and then add basis index. And then on the drop down here, we want to choose record name and then queryable. And then you want to hit save changes at the top here. Cool. And then we want to do a similar thing where we just go to indexes and then we'll go to category and then add basis index, record name, queryable, save changes. So now let's go back to our records and we'll try and run that again. So private, we'll choose this item and then query records. And you should now see that we can see all of the data that's being synced in CloudKit. And you can even see that our images are also here as well. So that's also in CloudKit as well. So it automatically syncs images for you, which is pretty sweet. And if we go to our category and then go to query records, we can see all our categories. But like I said before, we actually have duplicate data here because we chose when you launch your app, we want to pre-fill our, app with some data. So how do we handle that? So we need to actually write some code specifically to interact with iCloud to basically check to see if there are items in iCloud, then don't, insert those pre-filled items so they don't get automatically synced up. So we'll do this now. So let's go into our project. And I'm just going to create a new Swift file. I'm just going to call this pre-filled CloudKit manager. And then we'll just write out this. So we're going to import CloudKit and then we're just going to do a skeleton. So we're going to say class. So when you're working with CloudKit in code and you want to access your database, you actually need to create a CK container and use the actual identifier that you defined when you created your project. So we're going to do that now. So I'm just going to say private let db is equal to CK container. And then the identifier, we'll get that in a second, but we just want to say here, private database, cool. So this identifier here is going to be what we configured in our, project here. So if I just go to capabilities, we want to copy this name. So we're going to need a function to basically help us get this. So I'm going to create a function called fetch items. And the purpose of this is to help us fetch those items from CloudKit. So we'll say function. So when you're working with items in CloudKit, everything is a CK record. So this essentially will either return to us an array of CK records, or if it fails, we'll get an error. And because we're using a result type, and it's just going to be a closure. So we need to start writing the code to actually fetch this now. We want to basically say like what level this query should execute on. So should this be a high, background task, or whatever? Now, for us, because we're doing this on app launch, we want this to be pretty important. So this should essentially be on, the highest type of background priority. So, and you'll see that we created a config for our operation. And in terms of the quality of service, I've said it should be user instantiated. So that's a higher priority to basically check that these items are in CloudKit. Then we're going to need to write a predicate to actually help us fetch the query that we pass into this function. So when you're working with CloudKit, it's not similar to SwiftData where you basically create like a high order function. You have to write out a query similar to how you would in core data with like a predicate, an NS predicate fetch request. So we'll pass in this query when we configure our database. So I'm just going to say here db dot. We can actually switch on this result on whether it's a success or a failure. So I'm going to say switch res, and we should get two cases here. So we should get a case for success, which will have the results. We'll just say let data like so. And then for failure, we should get an error. So we'll just say let error like so. Cool. So let's handle our error one first. So if something goes wrong, we want to basically call our completion handler and pass in the result type with our error. So just to help us help debug, we'll just say print, and then something went wrong. Error like so, and then we'll just call our completion after it, and we'll say dot failure, and then this failure will be the error like so. Cool. And then on our success, we now want to basically get those items that are in CloudKit already and just simply return it back to, within our completion handler. So I'm going to create an array. So if we actually look at the type here for data, it's actually a tuple here. So I want to create an array that we'll use to return this. So let's handle this now. So all we're simply saying here is that we'll create an array of CK records, we'll loop through, add it to our array, and then return it as a success. Now, you can be a 10x programmer and say this is doo-doo, but just for the sake of this video, we're just going to do something dirty and quick. Okay, cool. Now I want to create an alternative of this function because I want to actually use Swift concurrency. Now, in order to do that, it's quite simple. All you need to do is just use this, and then we'll go to editor, and then refactor, and then add async wrapper. So now what we'll do is we'll basically get a asynchronous version of our exact same function, just like a wrapper around it. If you want to learn more about Swift concurrency, you can actually check out my free course that covers everything you need to know about Swift concurrency. So we actually want to make a change to our code here. And before, what we're doing is that when the app was launching, we'll actually checking to see, if there's a user default value, and then we'll insert items. We actually don't want to rely on this user default anymore. We want to rely on CloudKit. So all this code that we have here for user defaults, we're going to take this out, and we're going to remove this because we don't need it no more. And I can go, and then we should get some errors in our main app entry point because we've deleted a whole bunch of stuff, which is fine. So this can go, and we could probably get rid of this as well. And instead, so now we've actually took out this code here in terms of like when we should create pre-filled items. We now want to actually add in code to check to see if the database in CloudKit is empty, then pre-fill it. So we don't want to do that at the main entry point of our app, because if we do it here, it's possible that our app can crash because the actual container isn't ready to save items. So we're going to do this in our content view. So in our content view, we'll first of all import CloudKit. And then after we import CloudKit, we'll then create an instance of our pre-filled, manager that we created for CloudKit. So I'm just going to do that here. So we'll say private let CK pre-filled manager. It'll be an instance of that. Okay, cool. And then on our actual navigation stack here, we'll just create a task. We could do it on a list, it doesn't matter, but just so it's clear for you to see, I'm going to create a task here. I'm going to now use that function that we, set up before. So the first thing we want to do is actually check our categories. So we're going to, first of all, decode our categories from JSON, and then we're going to see if it actually exists in CloudKit. So let's add this in now. So now we have that in, and then after this, we're then going to create a predicate to actually, query if those categories exist in CloudKit. So we're getting our categories, decoding it, creating our predicate to check to see if there's any categories that match this title that we're going to pass in of these array. So we're going to do like a bulk check. So we're not checking each individual one just for performance. And then now in our categories, we want to check to see if it is empty, then we can assume that there's nothing in CloudKit. So we're just going to say here, if categories is empty is equal to true, then we're going to write some code here. I'll make it optional, yeah. Then we're going to write some code here to actually decode our items in our JSON file and then insert that. And then we're going to do a bit of cleanup if there's any duplicate categories just in case. So let's do that now. So what we're doing in here is that if it's empty, we'll first of all get our JSON, and then we'll just basically in the model context within this file, insert those categories, and then we'll start to decode our to-dos. And then after we start to decode our to-dos, we're going to loop through each one of those to-do items and then create a fetch request to basically check the category just in case there's no duplicates. We'll insert the item into the database, so into SwiftData. And by doing that, whenever we insert, it's actually automatically going to sync to CloudKit for us. So we don't need to save this to CloudKit and SwiftData. And then the final thing we do is just clean up any duplicates. So just in case there's any categories that have duplicate items, this will delete those duplicate categories. So they'll all go away. And that works because of the way we set up our relationship in this video, where we actually had our relationship delete type. Cool. So what we want to do now is actually test this out. Now, the best way to test this out is to actually clear our database completely and then rerun our app fresh. So if I just go into our, CloudKit database here, and it's because I deleted some data previously before. So we got all our items here, and I'm just going to delete them all like so. And then same for our categories. We're just going to delete them all as well. So, all right, cool, sweet. So we're going to need to delete the app off our simulator and also as well off the real device. So I've already done it on the real device. So let's just run this on our iPhone 15 Pro to see what happens. And you'll see that we now see all of our items. And if I go to category, we actually see all of our categories as well. And if I was to run this on my real physical device, so let's unlock this, and then we'll run it on our iPhone, you'll now see that after a while, we don't have any kind of duplicates. So we've only got 3 items. And then let's just run this again. And you can see that we still only got 3 items. So we're not duplicating it anymore. And if you go to our, core data, we've got 3 categories, which is what we want. And we should have 3 items, which is what we want. So now we've handled stopping duplicates in iCloud. And so you can just do that with a bit of code just like that by checking if it exists or not. So this whole time, we've just been developing our container, in, development mode. This is one thing that a lot of people forget to do, and that is to actually deploy your actual, container changes. So when you want to go to production, it's fine, it's fine doing what we did now, but when you want to go to production, you can't do what we've been doing. You actually have to deploy this basically database. Now, in order to do that, it's quite simple. All you need to do is in CloudKit dashboard, there's an option here called deploy schema changes. Now, if you were to hit this, you'll now see a difference of everything that's happened. So you can actually see all the changes and what's different between the two. So you can review that before you actually deploy it. And now if we hit deploy, you'll now see that this text here will have changed. So we'll go to done. And I know it's saying error loading container details, but if I should just refresh this page real quick, you'll now see that this has changed to this container has been deployed to production. Now I actually do have a dummy example of previous containers. So I'm just going to turn one of these on so you can just see it. And if I was to go back to one of those examples, you'll see that it actually doesn't have the green mark and it says it's not been deployed to production. So before you actually launch your app onto the App Store, you want to make sure that you do this as a step, because if you don't do this before you launch your app, 100% you're going to get a bunch of issues. So make sure you do that. Now we spoke about, if you've handled your app for a first time and you want to deploy it for the first time, but what about if you're in a situation where you want to actually do some kind of migration? So let's say we want to add a new property to our item. So let's go back to our app. I'm just going to stop them both from running. Okay, cool. And what I want to do now is on our item, let's say we want to add a new property called isDefault so we can know what items are default items. So we'll go into our model and I'm going to have to do a migration here. So I'm not really going into too much detail about this, but if you want to learn more about migrations, I have a video on my channel which you can check out that covers pretty much everything. So definitely check that out. So I'm just going to quickly create a new model. All right, cool. So I've just done a migration and all I've done is just added two new properties. So on our item in our version 5 of this, I've added isDefault and also on our category, so we can maybe track which ones are default so you can never delete them if that's what you want to do. And then in our app, we just basically set up the migration here to go from version 4 to version 5. That's pretty much it. So what would happen if I was to now run this on one of my devices? So let's say if I wanted to run this on a simulator, let's see what happens. So we'll actually get a crash. And the reason why we'll get a crash is because right now in our CloudKit container, it's not aware of these two new properties. So when you're doing migrations and you make changes to your model, not only do you need to make the changes in here, you also need to make the change in CloudKit as well. So let's go into CloudKit and add those properties to our models. So if we go to our schema, and if we go to record types, category, we should be able to add a new field in here. So if we go on the plus, we want to say in here, CD underscore is default. So we just want this to be a Boolean. Now there isn't an option for Boolean here, and it's actually represented as 1 and 0s when you're working with CloudKit. So we just want to choose here int64 and then choose done like so. And then we're going to need to also add this to our item. But before we do that, we want to make this queryable. We need to make this queryable, searchable, and sortable. So we'll go to indexes and then we'll add that in for our new property. So if you want to get here, all you need to do is go to indexes. We'll choose our category, add basic index, and then on our isDefault, we'll make it queryable, save changes. And we don't really need to make it sortable because it's just a Boolean, so we're not going to make it sortable. But if it's a value where you need to sort it, then I'd recommend you add that in as well. Let's do the same thing for our item. And we'll create a new record field. And we'll call this, again, CD is default, like so. And then int64, done, save the changes. And then we can click on this edit indexes. And then now we can go all the way down to the bottom and add this as a basic index. So if we scroll down, we should see isDefault here, select it, make it queryable, save changes like so. Cool. So now we've added those new properties to our model and also in CloudKit as well. So let's run this. So go back to our app, stop, we'll run it. So we run our app, you'll still see that we're actually still having an issue here where it's crashing. Now, for the life of me, I couldn't figure this out and I don't know why this is still a thing, but when you want to force like unwrap and force try on a model container, basically it's not a good idea. So to get around this issue, what I realized that I had to do was use a do catch block, and then we can then call a fatal error here if this messes up, and then just say, you know, the error. And then I realized that if I copy all of this, put it in here, and then don't force try, and then run this again, it should be fine. So this took me a lot of time, yeah, so I feel like I deserve a badge for this shit. Oh, cool. So now you can see here that when we run the app here, it's not actually crashing anymore. And if I was to just run the app on my, you know, physical device, so it can do a migration as well, so you'll now see that it actually doesn't crash either, and it does a migration successfully. Now, I'm going to give you a bit of a warning here, and I'm going to come back on the screen so I can be serious about this. I'm going to give you all a bit of warning, right? And in my opinion, I'm still not 100% sure that migrations and using CloudKit with SwiftData is the best idea, in my opinion, because I feel like I've run into situations where I just get random crashes out of nowhere. So I feel like at this year's DubDub, at DubDub 24, hopefully it becomes a bit more stable. But as of right now, if you want to do a migration with CloudKit, you can, you know, face crashes sometimes. So it's a bit 50-50 in my opinion. So that's just something to be aware of. Now, when you do make these changes with a migration, the final thing you will need to do is actually deploy your changes with a migration. So we go back to the CloudKit dashboard, you'll see that we actually have an option here called deploy schema changes, and it's showing us here that we've got these new changes on here. And then all we need to do is hit deploy, and now that will be in production. But like I said, just be a bit wary when you're working with migrations, because I have realized that sometimes it can be a bit funky in it. All right, cool. Now, I know that was quite a long video, but I pretty much covered everything that you need to know about handling, you know, CloudKit and SwiftData. So hopefully you can put this in your apps. Now, like I said before, in my opinion, if you want to use CloudKit with your SwiftData apps, in my opinion, I'd only use it for very simple configuration type stuff. If you want to do a migration, you do run the risk of it possibly crashing because it's not stable enough, in my opinion, yet. But if you're someone who likes to live life on the edge, go for it. So that's everything from me in this video. If you want to learn more about SwiftData and SwiftUI, you can check out the courses on my channel and the playlist. That's everything from me. I'll catch you on a bit. Deuces.